We've got a long way to go and a short time to get there today, so I'm going to just jump right into it and ask you a question as we begin. Have you ever tried, I didn't realize I did a Smokey and the Bandit reference there just now, so all of you boomers, you're welcome. Sorry. Have you ever tried, like, when your life just feels like it's not quite right, or maybe you're just not as happy as you were, you try to add things? Have you ever done this before? And I don't mean like maybe you go buy something, though retail therapy might be a part of your vernacular, I don't know. But like you add something. You're going to take an extra vacation. You're going to join an activity. You're going to, you try to add in, right? You add something else, one more thing. I find that ironic because I've never met a single person who got happier the fuller their calendar got. But we do that anyway. I'm not really sure why that is the case, and we end up exhausted. So I want to put a line up here for you for a second, and this is going to be like a 0 to 10 thing, and I want to ask you to participate with me for a second. So I just want to imagine with me, all right, and don't raise your hand and don't elbow anybody yet, but if you were to like plot your life, okay, on like a 0 to 10 scale, the way you feel about it right now, right? So like 0, like everything's bad, right? You hate your job, your boss hates you, your kids are bad and you're bad and you don't like them and they don't like you, and your relationships are a mess, all the things, like it's bad, right? But over here on like 10, you're the envy of the neighborhood. Everybody is in your life, they want your life. And if they could have your life, they'd have more of it, right? Everyone wants what you have. If you were to imagine your life, and this is so rudimentary, I get it, it's not, life is a little bit more complicated than this, but humor me for a second. If you were to think about your life right now, and the way you feel about it, where would you be? Just take a second and pick a number between 0 and 10. And don't say it out loud and don't ask somebody next to you, okay? But 0 to 10. All right, you got it? Everybody got one? Okay, so just to make sure, if your number is somewhere between 0 and 10, would you please raise your hand? Okay. We are paying attention, all right? We are paying attention. Now look, like what you probably did in your brain is you started doing like an aggregate, right? And what I mean is like you started kind of putting things together in your head. So like you're saying, well, this is the way that I might think about it. I'm maybe an 8 or a 9. I feel pretty good, right? I got 4 amazing kids. I really love them, but like 2 of them are teenagers, which is like a thing. So maybe that pulls me down a little bit. Or I got an incredible job. I love what I do, but sometimes it's really stressful. So sometimes I might think it's a 10, but other days I might think it's like a 6. And so you probably did this. You averaged all the things, the moments, the situations, the circumstances of your life. You put them together, and you probably came up with some sort of number. Now, if you're a 10, nobody wants to hear from you today, all right? I'm joking. But also, if you're a 0, you got some stuff going on too, right? I want you to think about these numbers for a second. I want to add a little bit more definition to them, okay? So when you think about life, 10 would be like life to the full, right? So like that's like it's the best. And I don't mean like it's full, like your schedule's packed. I just mean like your life is what you hoped and dreamed that it would be. And 0 is way less than that, right? So let's just add some things into this for a second. If you're 0, we'll just call that fully dead. And if you're a 10, we'll call that fully alive, right? Like this spectrum of life. And again, I'm making this super simple. I get it. It's a little bit more nuanced than this, but humor me for a second, okay? Now, it's easy to define the edges, fully alive, right? And fully dead, right? Somewhere in between the way we would think about our life. But the truth is, most of us are somewhere in this gap. Right? So the gap needs a label too. And what you're tempted to do is say, because, well, I'm an optimist, maybe most of you are optimists, and you say, well, like, it's okay, right? It's all right. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. And so I want to add a label to you today, and this might make you feel a little uncomfortable for a second, but I want to add a label to this just so you can think about life maybe a little bit differently. If you're somewhere between 0 and 10, you're partially dead. Like life is not quite right. Now, the question you should be asking in your brain, and it's the question that I want to ask too, right? That if this is fully alive on this end and this is fully dead and we're somewhere in between, how do we close the gap? Is closing the gap even possible? In other words, is fully alive possible? Is it possible that life could consistently be 10? Now hold that thought for a moment because we're in a series that we're calling I Will Follow. And what we've been trying to do in this series is look at all of those areas of the faith life where we're tempted to take the off-ramp, right? We're tempted to take the eject button. We're tempted to unfollow because something happened, or there's a circumstance, or there's a thing, or life just hits this kind of roadblock, and we can't process what it means to still be a believer, but also have faced this thing, right? And so we've been answering these questions, and each one of these messages has been an I will follow when situation. Now, we got this because the early church didn't call themselves Christians, right? The early church, the first people who considered themselves to be in the life that God had tried to give them through Christ, they called themselves followers of the way. And the reason they did this is because Jesus had said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. He had defined himself in this way. And in fact, the only times that the word Christian appears in the New Testament is really derogatory. They're saying these people, right? It's like they're making fun of them. When Jesus' followers talked about themselves, they called themselves followers of the way. And we like that a whole lot better. Because really, what the Bible teaches, what Scripture shows us, is that when Jesus came, he came to offer a whole way of life. Not just like a t-shirt you can put on every once in a while, not just like a community you can come to on Sunday, but like that your life would be changed, that life would be different because you're a Jesus follower. Something would change inside of you. Your perspectives would change. The lens at which you looked at the world would be different. Something would not be the same on the other side of your decision to follow Jesus. That your act of faith would meet God's faithfulness, and something extraordinary would happen. And the idea behind all these I will follow statements we've been wrestling with is that you can be a Christian and not be a follower of the way of Jesus. Because we live in the South, and we live in the Bible Belt, and you ask anybody around here, they'll say they're a Christian, right? Because you kind of have to, in a way. But the more complicated life has become as of late, and the more complicated the relationship the church has had with the world has come recently, it's easier to maybe say this word than it is to live this way. And so we've been wrestling. We've been wrestling together because all of us face this, even me. Every day I'm faced with a different circumstance and a different opportunity for me to choose whether I'm going to continue to follow or not. Now, week one, the very first statement we chose was, I will follow when life feels heavy. Right? I'm going to choose that when life hands me something really heavy, I'm going to choose to continue to follow. And in fact, instead, I'm going to give it to God. And we had this prayer we started with, Lord, I give you blank. Whatever it is that has been handed to me by the world is too heavy for me to carry. I'm going to hand it over. Now, last week, we said, I will follow when the path is unclear. Right? That I'm going to choose, I'm going to decide to continue to follow even when I'm not quite sure where we're going. That Jesus has a direction and he has a vision and a preferred future for me and for you, and he's leading us in that direction, even if it doesn't quite look the way we think it should. And so what I left you with was a statement from a guy I look up to, his name is Jeff Henderson. He said, don't let what you don't know keep you from doing what you can do. Don't let what you don't know keep you from doing what you can do. In other words, choosing to follow God in the midst of when the edges look blurry, choosing to continue to follow and move in the direction he's leading you will still get you where he wants you to go, and where he wants you is better than where you think you should be. Now, that's a tough tension to live in sometimes. And I own that, okay? I'm not naive. Life happens to me just as much as it happens to you. And that's why we've always said from the beginning that following Jesus is a decision. It's a pre-decision. We have decided to live life differently because of our decision to follow Jesus. So this week, number 3, we want to start with something that's a little bit different when it comes to life, right? And I asked all these questions about living life to the full a minute ago because the way we often look at the world, or the way life works, so when we say full life, usually that means that our calendars are booked, right? Which leads to exhaustion, which leads to burnout. And I spent a whole lot of time talking about that last fall, so I'm not going to belabor that today. But our third statement is, I will follow you when I'm exhausted. Would you just say this out loud with me for today as we begin? I will follow you when I'm exhausted. It's a choice, right? It's a choice. I think one of the things happens, and like I'm a parent of 4, and we've got our own stuff that we deal with, right? But I feel like most of the time when I find myself exhausted, when I find myself kind of, I know you've probably been like good tired, where you've done something, you just felt so good about it, right? That's different than exhausted. Exhausted is, I have run myself ragged, I have done all the things, and I have come out wanting, right? Most of the time when we get there, it's because we've been chasing happy. Now, you may not say that, right? We got this weird thing about saying happy in the Christian community. If you know me long enough to know, I don't fight the fight of joy versus happy. I just think it's kind of a silly semantic thing. But most of us, we find ourselves exhausted because we've been chasing happy, right? Life didn't quite, feel right this week, so we need a boat, right? Or gosh, if we just had a membership to that club, or if I just had a better car, if I just had a better job, if my kids, like this happens all the time, and it's seriously all the time. I start talking to a family, and I found out that their kids are in 5 different sports in 6 different cities and 3 different states and all the things, and I'm like, that's cool, it's awesome. I really hope that all works out. But every single time, I've never had one parent come and go, we're making it happen, and it's great, and it's awesome. Most of the time, it's, we're dying, right? And we had to eat 3 meals at the soccer field this week, so, and one of them was just a peanut butter stick or something, like something ridiculous. It's not, we're chasing happy, we're just not finding it. And look, this is not a shot at sports. I know better than that, okay? My kids play sports too, so don't say, Pastor Drew doesn't like sports. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that sometimes we have this tendency to think that this other thing, this other activity, this other, purchase is going to make us happy, and then it doesn't. We find ourselves frustrated, and then what do? We find another one, right? Well, this one didn't quite work, and so I'll get this one, and then I'll try this one. And so we're in this grind, and you may not call it a grind, but it's what it is. We're in this grind where we're trying to find the thing, whatever the thing is that will finally make us consistently happy, consistently fulfilled. But it's not working. So I ask you the question again. Is fully alive possible? Right? I mean, you've been working hard at it. I don't think any of you woke up this morning and decided you wanted your life to feel empty, right? I mean, you may feel that way, but nobody really wants that, do you? I mean, I can't even imagine someone going, gosh, I hope life stinks today. I can't process that. So you got to be chasing it. And it's innocent enough that it happens, like we were trying to find the right thing, the right combination of things. But the problem is because we look at fully alive like through the lens of moments. In other words, we often associate these like alive moments with a fully alive life. And let me give you an example. All right, so for me, one of the places that I feel most alive is when someone puts a plate of chicken nachos in front of me, right? I feel alive. There's queso, there's chicken, there's chips, there's peppers. It's the greatest thing in the entire universe, right? And I would eat that 3 meals a day if I knew it wouldn't kill me. In fact, it's probably part of my problem today. I feel really good when I'm eating the nachos. That doesn't stay, does it, right? It eventually wears off, or you get a stomach ache or something horrible happens and you feel like I regret this, right? You go home and you stand on the scale and you're like, what have I done? But in the moment, it felt really good. Or for example, I had this opportunity. It was the craziest thing I've ever got to do. I went with a group of pastors to Atlanta, and there was this network. They had this weird free pass for some of us to go to the Porsche Museum, and I got to ride in a Porsche on their test track doing 110. It was the coolest thing ever, right? And they're like drifting and spinning around, and I'm afraid I'm going to fly out the window. It was awesome, okay? And I thought, this is the greatest moment ever, right? But then I had to still get back in my 12-year-old Ford Expedition and drive back to Tuscaloosa eventually, right? It was a 10 for a minute, and then it came back to the 4 that it really was. And we have this thing where we tend to think, well, I'll just fill my life with more 10 moments, and that's how life will feel full. And if I might say, this isn't for everybody, but this is where addictions come from. Isn't it easy to see how this would feed addiction? I just want this happy, and this thing will make me happy, so I need it now. And then what happens is it doesn't make you as happy the next time, so you take more of it, and more of it, and more of it, and more of it, and you're just seeking this fully alive moment because of all the other moments in your life, the circumstances in your life that don't quite feel like they're landing right. And before you know it, you're addicted to something. And it could be substance, right? Or it could be retail therapy, or it could be Netflix, or I just stepped on somebody's toes. I'm really sorry. I'm just being honest, okay? We do this. This is the human condition. This is not just a Jesus follower thing. This is a human thing, that we're seeking out these ways to feel alive. And I don't know about you, but in my life, some of my biggest regrets came when I was trying to do this instead of this. So I just want to dispel this for you for a second. This is a myth, okay? It's a myth to think that you can fill your life with fully alive moments and have a full life. Another myth, just so you know, this is another one, I alluded to this a minute ago, I'm not going to spend so much time on it, but living a full life, and what I mean by like full life is the calendar, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. or 8 a.m. to midnight or whatever, completely full. That doesn't lead to a fully alive life either. Earlier this month, my son plays soccer. There was a triple header game, and we went to all 3 games. It was freezing cold outside. We were at the soccer field for like 7 hours. And it was great, and I love watching him play soccer, but I didn't walk off the field that day going, gosh, I feel so alive. I walked off the field going, someone get me a blanket in my bed now, stat, right? It's cold, and I'm miserable, and I hate winter, and I was lied to because the South isn't as warm as they promised, right? That's what I was feeling, right? Living a life that's a full life doesn't lead to a fully alive life. Now you fill in the blank. I have this tendency I have to be busy. And a mentor of mine has worked on this with me for a decade now. Like, busy does not equate to fully alive. It doesn't. And busy doesn't even equate to like right in that capacity, because you can fill your calendar with whatever you want. And just because you're doing things doesn't mean that those things are actually leading you towards a fully alive life. It just means you're busy. So one more time, just to make sure, I'm hoping you're asking this question by now. How do we live a fully alive life? What does it actually look like? Is it even attainable? Is this even possible, right? Because right now all we're doing is exhausting ourselves. I know I'm speaking for you, right? But even if you're not a Jesus follower, like, you got to feel tired in the season of the world that we find ourselves in. This is why John Mark Comer is writing books called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. This is why I spent like 7 weeks talking about eliminating hurry from your life last year and trying to quit burnout and all those things, because it's culturally relevant for all of us. We're all stuck there. And I have this theory that it's not because we can't stop as much as it is that we're chasing happy and we don't know how to feel fully alive. Like, the pandemic robbed something from us, and we've been trying to get it back ever since. Now, believe it or not, Jesus answered this question. And yes, you're in church, so here it is. You should know by now that the answer is going to come from something that Jesus said. But he did. He talked a lot about this. And I want to read something that he said that I feel like speaks really deeply to where we find ourselves in this moment. And in fact, if you find yourself exhausted, if you find yourself completely like strung out, don't know how to take the next step, or you've been chasing happy so long that you want to stop the rat race and find something real and true, don't miss what Jesus is about to say. So I want to read this to you from the 10th chapter of the Gospel of John. So Gospel of John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, 4th book of the New Testament. John was an eyewitness of all the things with Jesus. He wrote his Gospel a little bit later. We've been talking about his Gospel for a couple of weeks now, so hopefully you've at least opened to it by now. But if you've got your Bibles or your Bible app, whatever, turn with me to John chapter 10 for a second, because we're going to unpack quite a bit of this and listen to what Jesus has to say. Now this happens, this group of Pharisees who were law keepers, they were like the religious people of the day. They were trying to figure out how to live a happy life too. And what they were doing was they had decided the best way for life to be happy was for them to like follow God's law to the letter. And everybody around them had to follow God's law to the letter too. So like they decided to build these laws upon laws upon laws. And so God had started with this really simple way of life, and they had just extrapolated it to nonsense. It was crazy, book after book after book of interpretation. And they were trying to live it out. And they weren't happy. They weren't making anybody else happy either. And so Jesus, in a critique to them, says these words. Very truly I tell you, Pharisees, but again, you could fill in us too. Very truly I tell you, people, because he's just speaking to them as their audience. Anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one, says, he continues, the one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. That's Jesus' answer. Any questions? Let me pray. I'm joking. I'm joking. We don't get this because, I don't know about your neighborhood, but there are no sheep farmers in my neighborhood. Like, I don't run into them. I grew up on a farm when I was a kid. I know sheep are kind of dumb. I showed them in 4-H a few times. But like, I don't have a whole lot of life experience with sheep. But in the culture that Jesus is speaking in, they would have known all about this. So let me break this down for you for a second, okay? So Jesus starts off by saying that anyone who comes into the sheep pen by any other way than the gate is a robber, okay? So the way this worked in this culture was there would be in every city, in every village, there would have been a specific pen. It would have been big enough that multiple flocks could have come in. So the way sheep farming works and again, a fully alive, happy life sheep is that they get to go out and eat grass and come back in and a wolf didn't eat them, okay? Life is pretty simple for them. But the shepherds, right, would take the sheep out into the pasture during the day. They would watch over them and then they would bring them back to the sheep pen at night. And they would get mixed in with everybody else's flock in this pen. And so they all had to come out through the same gate so they could sort it out and make sure that everybody got the right sheep. And this really cool thing would happen, okay? So when they put all the sheep in at night, the sheep would get there, the shepherds would close the gate, they would leave, they would come back to get them the next day, and they would stand at the gate, and they would call out, like they would just start speaking. And the sheep had spent so much time with the shepherd, they didn't know a whole lot, but they knew the shepherd's voice, and the sheep that belonged to that shepherd would follow him out of the gate. And so, and again, if you've ever grown up on a farm, you know this. You don't climb on people's fences. Okay, my daughter was in a horse therapy thing not long ago, and she wanted to climb up on the fence, and even I knew that was a no-no. You don't climb on somebody else's fence because it's just not good. And so Jesus is making this allusion to the Pharisees and their culture, that's not you come in through the gate, but you don't do anything else. Anyone else who comes any other way, they're trying to rob life. They're trying to take something away. This is the way. Right? And so back to the story of what he's saying, he starts talking about this gate, and I think it's going to break this down for you a little bit better. He says this: the gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. I love that. Can you imagine this really cool moment? They're in all the chaos of all the sheep mingling around in the pen, they hear the voice of the shepherd, and they move towards him. Right? Don't miss that. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And then this one's a long section of this, but I want to read it all to you. So that verse 4 and 5 go like this: when he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Now, Jesus, his whole crowd, even the Pharisees are standing there going, wait a minute, okay, we asked you about living a full life. This doesn't make sense to us. We get the metaphor, right? So John adds in this little section where he goes, Jesus was speaking in metaphor, not everybody understood it. So then he started talking about the fact that he was the gate, right? And he makes this connection to what's actually going on is that if you want this life, right, there's a pathway to get to this life that God has. And there's only one way to get there. And so the Pharisees are sitting back going, okay, well, tell us. And hopefully you're asking the same question. If it's possible to have a fully alive life, I want that. So tell me how to get there. And then in the 9th verse, Jesus says this: I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. Now, what does saved mean? We're in church, so I think Jesus was obviously alluding to eternal salvation, that he's come to do something big, that when he died on the cross and rose from the grave, he secured for us a life that goes beyond this life. But I also think he's talking about something else, because you remember the sheep are just looking for a day-to-day life, right? I want to get from here to the pasture, eat grass, not get eaten by a wolf, and come back. And the shepherd's job was to lead them to do that. The shepherd's job was to give them the best life they could possibly have. And so Jesus, again, I'm not saying he's not talking about eternity, but I think he's talking about the here and now too. That you could actually be saved from this life you're living now. That there could be change in the now. There's a theological principle, and I hope this isn't too heavy for you, but it's called the kingdom here and not yet. That Jesus' kingdom, which he talked about so much, it has been consummated through the resurrection of Jesus, and it exists today, but there's more of it that's coming later. The problem is we as Jesus followers so much focus on the later, and we miss the now. We think okay, well, I just got to survive 80 years of misery now, and then one day I'll have heaven. And I don't know about you, but that sounds like it stinks. And I don't think that's what Jesus died for. In fact, what he's going to say next, some of my favorite verses in the Gospel of John, and it just blows that out of the water. Because I don't think that's what life actually is supposed to look like by following Jesus. And when we miss that, I think that's why we end up exhausted. So he continues like this. He says, I'm the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. Right? I don't know what pasture looks like for you, but fill in the metaphor, fill in the blank. The thing you're searching for, the gap in your heart, the thing that you think will make you happy, the fulfillment you're seeking on the other side, they will come in, they will go out, they will find that. Right? The thief comes, he says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. Now, I want to pause here for a second before I read you the punchline, which is the best, okay? But The reason I want to pause here is because we need to own the fact that we don't live in a vacuum. Okay, we don't live in a spiritual vacuum, that God's not the only force at work in the world, that there's other things that are happening, and you don't need to be a Jesus follower to know this is true. That there are things that happen, circumstances that happen that want to rob your joy every single day. That there's stuff that happens. There's always stuff. There's stuff that will rob the life out of you. There's stuff that will bring you exhaustion. There's stuff that will wear you out and wear you down and make you like want to stay on your pillow. All of us experience that. And he says that. He owns that from the beginning. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. But that's not the end of the story. He says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Not glass half full, not like 3/4 away, not like, just a little bit. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. See, Jesus is promising this different way of life. And by living this different way of life, something happens in us. Now, the Apostle Paul, you're not familiar with him. He wrote most of the New Testament. He was a Jesus follower, but he wasn't one of the original followers. He became a Jesus follower after the fact. And in fact, he hated Christians. If you find yourself in the room this morning and you hate Christians, you would love the Apostle Paul because he wanted to stomp them all out. And then he became one. And then he became a really famous one because Jesus transformed his life. And he figured out that God was really up to something through Christ. And then he wrote most of our New Testament. When he's writing to the church at Galatia, he gave us a picture, like a view, a window of what this fully alive life looks like. And it's called the fruit of the Spirit. It's found in Galatians chapter 5, and it goes like this. But the fruit of the Spirit, let me make sure you understand what this means. The fruit of the Spirit means like the fruit of allowing God to work in your life, the fruit of allowing, choosing to follow Jesus and put your faith life first and putting him as the priority in your life. The fruit of that, the thing that comes from deciding to follow Jesus day in and day out, what happens in your life is love and joy and peace and forbearance, which just means patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. This is what the fully alive life looks like. Now for me, again, let's just think about life for a second. Put it back up here with this little 0 to 10 thing, okay? So this is the fully alive life. These are all the things that were just listed in the fruit of the Spirit. And here we are, back on our timeline again. You got your number in your head, right? Maybe it's a 4. Maybe it's a 7, 9, I don't know, wherever you are. You got your number in your head. Now, if you're doing what I'm doing, I'm going, you know what? Well, if I just had peace, if I'll just take peace. And if I could add peace into this, then I would probably move from here to maybe over here. Right? And so then we add peace. We just say, we'll take part of this. We'll just take this one little bit. If I could just have that, then some of the circumstance would move better. Or maybe a different way, you think about self-control, right? Self-control. If I could just add self-control, right? I was a little bit more careful the way I spend my money. I didn't yell at my boss all the time. I was a little bit more patient with my kids. If I could just control myself a little bit better, well, then the circumstance here at 7 would probably go to 10. But the beautiful thing is that's not what God has in mind. It's not an a la carte thing. What God has in mind is you would get all of this. Right? All of this would happen. You follow Jesus, and this is what happens in your life. Now, I don't know about you, but if this all happened pretty consistently in my life, if I was choosing to follow Jesus daily, and these were the things that ended up happening for me, I think I would feel like I'm a lot more over here. I think that's the point. See, I don't want to infer, I don't know all of your circumstances. I don't even know all of you. Some of you I've not even met. I don't know your name. But the human condition is the human condition. One of the things we're all guilty of, one of the things we all do, and no harm, no foul, okay, I'm not judging, is we're chasing happy and trying to find maybe one of these. If I can just grab onto one, and even if it's fleeting, at least I'll have it today and I'll feel a little bit better about today, and then tomorrow I'll sort out what's next. God knows that about you. God knows that about me. He knows that about all of us. And he goes, look, what you're looking for, I want to give you, it's an all skate. I'll give it all to you. This is what I want you to have. And so how is the fully alive life possible? Well, Jesus. Jesus is the gate to the fully alive life. Jesus is the pathway to get there, right? And that's a beautiful thing, because that means it's not in you. And it's not something you got to strive after. It's not something you got to fix. It's not something you got to work towards. It's not some scheduled appointment you got to make. It's not some camp you have to go to. It's not some like training you have to take. It's just Jesus. Jesus is standing here, right? There's a fence. And on the other side of the fence is the fully alive life that you want. It's the life that you want on the other side. It's lack of exhaustion. It's the hope that comes from having a life that feels like it has a purpose. It's right there. And the way to get there is Jesus. And the beautiful thing is this: the gate's open. You don't have to have fulfilled some sort of rule. You don't have to have cleaned yourself up. You don't have to have changed something about yourself to be able to walk through the gate that Jesus has made for you. The step is just to believe and to choose to follow. And the beautiful thing, one more thing and I'm done, okay? Jesus asked people who didn't even believe in him to follow him. And as they followed him, they stepped into a life where they believed him because they saw and they experienced what he could do. So maybe today, you might make a decision based on the fact that you want to feel hope and based on the fact that you want your life to move in a new direction. You might make a decision to give God a shot today. That you would step across the threshold of the gate that is Jesus, that you would take a step of faith, right? And that your act of faith would then come up against God's great faithfulness and then just see what he might do. And it's just as simple as this, okay? For some of us who are not Jesus followers yet, or you haven't decided to believe, it's very simple. You just pray and you ask God. You say, God, I believe that Jesus really is who he says he is. And I believe that he really did die for me. And he really did step out of the grave for me. And then I believe that you want what's best for me, and I'm willing to move in that direction. And then you choose to follow, right? That for some of us, we've already done the cross the line of faith thing. We've already decided that Jesus really is who he says he is. There's enough evidence for that. I think all of us have experienced enough of that. But then now it's, okay, well, I'm going to choose every single day to walk where you would have me go, that I will let you be the shepherd of my life, that I'll let you be the leader of my life, that I'll let you be the Lord of my life. And wherever you are, God's ready to meet you at that decision right now and show you something on the other side. I want to pray for you. I just want to give you this moment. I want to pray. I'm going to start with just a second of silence because we've got some time. And I want to give you that silence just to bow your head. And whatever side of this you're on, okay, maybe it's you're ready to make the step of faith. Maybe it's you need to commit your life to follow Jesus in a deeper and more meaningful way. I'm going to give you just a moment for that. And then I'm going to lead you in prayer as we close our time together today. So would you bow your heads, close your eyes. Heavenly Father, some of us came in this door today exhausted. And we're exhausted because we've been chasing a feeling or chasing a circumstance or chasing a dream that's not really ours. We find ourselves wanting. Every time we get a little closer to the carrot dangling on the stick, we realize it's not really fulfilling us the way we thought. And so here we are, desiring that you might make us alive. And God, for the people sitting in this room today that are still a little nervous or apprehensive about what it is that you're offering, would you just offer them the grace and the simplicity of being able to take the step, the first step into faith? To just, you know what? Jesus is who he says he is. And it's as simple as that. Would you meet them there in that act of faith? And for those of us in this room that maybe we've already crossed that line of faith, we just haven't committed our lives to you. We haven't gone all in. We haven't opened ourselves to the work that you want to do in us. God, would you just help us to walk boldly through the gate that is Jesus and step into the life you want for us. Wash away our exhaustion, God, with the hope and the life of Jesus. God, we just thank you so much for this time and these people. And I just pray, God, for those that have prayed along with me today, that you would just go to work in their lives. And that they would experience the depth and the breadth of your love starting now and every day from now. God, we love you. We ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you all so much for coming to TCAT this weekend. God bless you. Have a great